Michael Applebaum here, and this video is what are improvement, success, progress, achievement, and growth? They are all strains. All improvement is a response to stress. Unless there is stress, there is no strain or adaptation known as improvement. And we're going to provide you an example of stress, strain, and improvement using something that just about all of us are familiar with, and that's training versus exercise. I'll explain the distinction in a minute. And stress. We all know that professional athletes, high-level amateurs, and everybody who wishes to improve at a sport, for example, it's common, so you can relate to it. People who wish to improve at a sport have to train. And the question is, what is that process? And because the general adaptation syndrome, because stress and the body's response to it is similar no matter the stressor, the principles that we'll discuss for physical training can be applied to other types of stress. Training versus exercise, what's the distinction? Exercise is placing a demand on one of the two energy-producing pathways of the body. We're not going to get too deep into the science, but as most people probably know, there's aerobic exercise, cardiovascular endurance exercise, and anaerobic exercise, which is strength resistance training exercise or resistance exercise. And those are the two energy-producing pathways of the body. That's what they do. You produce energy aerobically or anaerobically. Training is placing that demand with the realistic intentionality of increasing the capacity of that metabolic pathway, which is to say, to improve. Just because you do something doesn't mean you do it sufficiently to improve. And that is the distinction between exercise and training. So here's an analogy. Suppose you want to get smarter from reading a page of text. You have a choice. You can study the text or you can skim it. Well, you're almost certainly more likely to succeed at getting smarter if you study the text instead of skimming it. And exercise is to skimming as training is to studying. Training is performed with a specific intensity, that is, with the realistic intentionality of improving. Exercise will not necessarily lead to improvement, and in fact, you can exercise and end up worse off over time than had you trained. Training is more stressful than exercise. Training leads to the strain known as improvement. So it's critical that you really understand what stress is, why you want stress, and why you need stress, because to succeed at all undertakings, including fitness, right? General adaptation syndrome, principles that we're going to apply to fitness are going to apply to other domains. You must accept and seek and cause and experience stress intense enough to cause the strain known as improvement. That improvement is your habituation or your inormment. And when you do improve, to improve more, you have to add more stress so that your next strain is an improvement over the prior. Unless there is stress, there can be no improvement. And it makes no difference in the domain. If it's in education, if it's in sport, if it's in cooking, if it's in anything, you name it. Unless there is stress, there can be no improvement. Stress is a demand placed on a system. So for us, stress is a demand placed on a biologic system. And stress is neither good nor bad. It is an event. The response to stress is called strain, and unless it's of the Wile E. Coyote variety, we talked about that earlier, an anvil on your head, a safe on your head, the strain from stress does not break you. If you can handle the strain from a stress, then you can achieve what is called improvement. And to continue the improvement, you have to overload from there. You have to add more stress over time as you habituate to the previous level of stress. The more stresses you see and the more resulting strains you can handle, the better you become. So again, in the limited universe of fitness that we're talking about, physical activity, why do you care about stress? Because the principle is applicable generally. It's a general adaptation syndrome. This is a quote from a textbook by a man named George Brooks, Exercise Physiology. It talks about becoming better at sport, for example. In the absence of appropriate stress, functional capacity deteriorates. That would be like we talked about earlier. You could backslide from exercise, but not from training. Physiological systems respond to appropriate stimuli, the demand placed on the system. Sometimes the stimulus is called stress, and the response is called strain. Repeated stresses on physical systems frequently lead to adaptations, resulting in an increase in functional capacity. That would be improvement. Physiologically, the purpose of any training session is to stress the body so that adaptation results. Physical training is beneficial only as long as it forces the body to adapt to the stress of physical effort. If the stress is not sufficient to overload the body, then no adaptation occurs. And if you happen to be somebody who plays a musical instrument instead of exercise or any terms that are related to exercise, this little quote, put down studying or put down whatever that is applicable to your particular undertaking, because it's general adaptation. So the whole point of engaging in training is to stress yourself to the point of adaptation. Another word for adaptation is progress. Yet another word for adaptation is improvement. And another word for adaptation is success. And still another word for adaptation is achievement. Add two more words for adaptation: intended results. And there are more. Virtually all are positive things, except maybe for injury, but that's a different story. Once you have achievement, results, progress, improvement, success, you continue training, which is to say stressing yourself more to get even better. Otherwise, you will deteriorate. So what does it take to improve one's fitness? Stress. Only stress will make you fitter, and that stress must be adequate to result in the strain known as improvement. And more generally, what does it take to improve oneself, including handling stress? Stress. Only stress of sufficient intensity will make you better. Strain, all improvement is a response to stress. All improvement is strain. Unless there is stress, adequate stress, there is no adaptation, there is no strain known as improvement. Now, how many times have you heard someone say that you should be outside your comfort zone in order to get better at something? Well, being outside your comfort zone is stress, and getting better at something is strain. No stress, no strain, no improvement, period. And to continue improving, you must increase the stress.